So we're going to get right into it here. I've got a few things to talk about before we get into the actual good stuff. So the question period has been great. We've been, our panelists have been awesome, sticking around, virtually answering or having a discussion about most questions that were asked. So we're going to continue giving away a jacket for the best question voted on by me, and a hat for, I guess we'll call it the second best question, or maybe somebody updates me on the Major League Baseball transactions. Remember, do that in the Q&A, not the chat. But likely I'm going to give the hat to somebody that tells me the Blue Jays had a great big signing or something along the lines. We got a couple big Jays fans on the webinar tonight, so much appreciated, and we'll entice you with a hat. So we're going to get right into it tonight, and I'm by no means showing off these numbers to be depressing. The reason why we're talking about extending the grazing season is because, well, from my perspective, it gives us a chance to have animals on the land longer and cycle nutrients, and build resiliency and improve our topsoil. All excellent ideas. However, a really, really good benefit of extending the grazing season is reducing our costs. So I tell just about everyone in the meetings that we do that cattle farms, although I love them, very few understand the real cost of running a cattle herd. So I always recommend, for the viewers in Saskatchewan, Alberta, I'm sure this resource exists in your guys' provinces as well. If not, hop on the Manitoba one. It just gives you a really good breakdown of actual costs. And as you can see on the right page here, the row down the side, you can actually put your own costs in. Put actually your farm's real cost and see your cost of production on a cow, commercial cow for a year. So I know these numbers are a little bit blurred, but I do them every year because I really want to know, like, have an understanding that we are being profitable in what we're doing. And spoiler alert, if we're selling into this corrupted cattle commodity market, it's just, we have to be extremely cognizant of our costs, and utilizing the animals on the land for as many days as possible. So again, I'm not doing this to depress anyone. I just wanted to bring awareness to what we're talking about, which is reducing costs on a cow-calf operation. So here's some of the highlights from that budget that I just showed you. And again, all these numbers, they have, there's different resource pages that show you exactly how they came up with these numbers. You know, lots of open source data and whatnot. And yeah, here they are, and they are alarming. So in 2021, the total cost of production on a cow is about $1,650 per cow. Now, you say to yourself, yeah, but is that paying you? Because why are we doing this? To make money. So that is paying you on 150 cow-calf operation, $200 per cow. Because God forbid we make $30,000 a year and live below the poverty line, taking care of 150 cows. The gross revenue per cow, again, these are averages, so $1,189.90. I think that is a 525 pound calf at $2.17. My numbers might be a bit off there, but this is average selling price for a net profit of negative $426. So this is why it is so important, and what's honestly so scary for the future, which is how much longer can commercial cattle producers sustain what is going on in this industry? Again, yes, it has a lot to do with corruption in the commodity market, but I think also it presents an opportunity, like BSE did, to take an honest look at our production methods and, you know, how can we ever improve what's going on? So coming back to that same budget, cost per cow per day on winter forage. So I think also pretty reasonable numbers. It was 45 pounds a day dry matter per cow at 7.5 cents for forage, which gives you $3.44 per cow per day on winter forage. Cost per cow per day on extended grazing forages. So, right, just extending your grazing season into the fall or early spring. And my screen is blocking that, but I believe it's $1.18 per day for a cost savings of $2.26 per cow per day. So what does that mean in real dollars? If we have 150 cows times by $2.26 per day, every single day we are not feeding winter forage to our cows, we are saving $340. Now, if we can somehow, and many of the panelists that are on tonight, I would guess all of them, if we can extend that grazing season for just 80 more days, so that means October, November, and December, on 150 cows, that's going to save us 27,000 in total savings for a cost savings per cow of $180, and we can get pretty close to talking about having a profitable cow herd and maybe actually paying the farmers and ranchers that are producing this beef. So we didn't lose everyone, so that's good. Like I said, I don't take solace in reporting this information. I am just the messenger, but I think it's a really good opportunity to take a look at some of our production methods and see how we can ever improve them. So with that being said, we're going to get into our first panelist here. Stu, if you want to unmute yourself and let us see your pretty face. So this is my very good friend, Darcy Stewart, from Clearwater, Manitoba, just about 10 miles north of here. Stu is within my regenerative soil health circle. It's very exciting, and I'm very grateful for him that he's picked up on some of these practices and learning and growing and trialing all this stuff as well. So Stu, why don't you tell us a little bit about your farm? I'll try and keep up with the clicker, and we'll get into her, bud.
Okay, thanks, Joe. I farm in Clearwater with my dad, my brother, and my wife. We've kind of grain, cattle. We had a feedlot in the past, and we kind of got bit by the regenerative bug a few years ago, and we've just been really lucky to have a group of people around here and kind of get into it. So
maybe before we get into the slides, just talk about kind of what you grow on the grain side, what you do on the cattle side, and then how you're trying to integrate the two.
Yeah, the grain, I mean, it's been a pretty diverse rotation, I guess. We have oats, wheat, peas, flax, corn, soybeans. I'm trying to do a whole lot of other crops in there. The cattle, it's a cow-calf operation, and we've backgrounded the last couple of years, planted cropland down and plan grazed our calves, and then put them back in the feedlot the following year. I guess with the grain, and we're going to get into it tonight, but with the grain, just trying to figure out a way to generate a revenue stream with the grain as well as with the cattle, so be it extended grazing, and then trying to lower input costs by planting down grain land and grazing calves on it.
Cool. Well, let's get talking about what we're here to talk about, which is extending the forage season. So I know obviously you, I know this, but the people on the webinar maybe don't. You guys do mostly cover crop silage. And you can tell the story better than I, but this was 2019 where we had a wet fall and early snowfall, just like what you saw from the regrowth of the cover crops. And I know you got this picture on there with all the snow, talking about how the cows utilized it. Yeah.
So 2018, we had, and this, I mean, we're coming from a very conventional farm, right? And 2018, we have a feedlot full of cattle. Our calves are fattening, and then it was a long summer feeding calves, and then come fall, we started feeding our cows. I think it was October 1st, and at that point, we knew, maybe I didn't know it, but I sure felt like we needed to change something in a hurry. And luckily enough, that winter, I have good friends around here, and they kind of threw out the idea of growing a cover crop for silage, undersowed to annual ryegrass and vetch. And 2019 was an absolutely perfect year for it. No inputs, and this was the regrowth. We were quite pleased with it. We turned 30 cow calf pair out there. I think it was September 10th. And October 12th that year, we got 2-3 feet of snow, and these were the only group of cows that I didn't bother feeding. Everybody else we hauled hay to, and had to make sure that they had something to eat. But these girls were able to forge through, and they put their noses down and come up with just green stained snow all around them. It was something else to see.
I will second that. In 2019, we had cows grazing on something that looked very similar, and it's just amazing. Where it was like, we couldn't even get there. I would have fed them if I could get there, but I couldn't get there, and finally trudged out there, thinking you were going to find like 100 dead cows, and they were absolutely fine. If they know it's there, they will absolutely go down and find it. So sorry, Stu, there might be a bit of a delay, but I got your 2021 full season regrowth. Why don't you talk about kind of the year you had on the farm in 2021, and then kind of what you saw as far as, a good opportunity to talk about plant diversity and kind of the importance of the different species for different conditions.
Yeah, so 2021, I mean, everybody kind of has a pretty good idea what some of the struggles were. We were no different. We took our silage crop off early, and I think it was first week of August, and luckily enough, we got a few rains after that, and it was amazing. Just all the different plants you'd noticed coming up, and the millet, obviously, and the sorghum. For whatever reason, they were very prominent this year. I mean, in years past, maybe it would have been something else, but this year the sorghum and the millet really took off, and the sugar beets that came in really well. And I thought we were in big trouble because 2019, when we had lots of rain, we were already worried about feeding in October, and this year with the drought, we get a little bit of rain, and a lot of growth came, and it really saved us this year.
Amen, my friend. Well, let's get talking about some intercrops. So this is near and dear to my heart, but and I know you got some numbers here, Stu. I thought, they're on the next page, but why don't you talk about kind of the concept, what you guys did with corn and vetch, and then we got some numbers on the next slide.
Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of stealing your thing here, because I definitely got it from you. But anyways, we 2020 we dropped corn silage, but we still want to grow corn to have it in our rotation. Really like it as a crop in what we grow, and we trialed a 60-inch corn and a 30-inch corn with undersowed to vetch, and put it up against just the conventional regular input corn. And the question's going to come up. How many pounds of vetch did you sow? Did you seed at the same time? Tell us about herbicide time. Yeah, no. So we, who was it? I think it was eight pounds of vetch, and which it might have been a little high. It was a good vetch year. And then as far as it was, that's the worst part, that we had to go over the field 3 times. We put our phos down and our nitrogen, and then we came back and put the vetch, very shallow seeded that, and then came back over it with the planter. It was time consuming doing that, going over it 3 times. And then for the herbicide, we used 3/4 of a liter. I'm not a chemical guy, so I don't know if somebody else.
270 grams of glyphosate native.
Yeah. So we cut it back. I know other guys have cut it back more, and there was we had a little bit of on the outside rounds of there'd be millet or maybe a bit of pigweed where there's more compaction, but you get out in the middle of the field, and that vetch was just incredible. It's something I've never seen before. And then talk about, we got your numbers right here, but just to kind of talk about the strategy after harvest, Stu. Yeah, so we harvest that, and it was early October. I want to say October 12th. We brought our bred heifers there, and we turned them out November 4th. Maybe all on here. So anyways, we kicked them out November 4th, and their condition was phenomenal. And then we got closer to December, and we thought we'd better bring them home. I think it was December 20th that we brought them home. We were worried about their condition, but they did very well out there. The idea was that we'd keep them out there as long as possible. We've got a hoe drill, so we didn't know how we'd seed into it. We could have left them out there for another probably month and a half if we were a little more experienced with it.
So this is very interesting, Stu. I know this was a few years ago you did this, but with current fertilizer prices, I'm sure this second point will perk some ears up.
Yeah, I think we usually go about 120 pounds of nitrogen and that 30, 40 pounds of phos. We just cut everything in half. We saw no yield difference. It's a bit of a trade-off, I guess, because the vetch seed is, it's pricey, but we just could not get the grazing days if it was just a monocrop corn crop. And like I said, the cows, they did phenomenal on it. And it was some of the easiest keeping of cattle through winter we ever had. So.
And I forget, Stu, did you paddock that off or you kicked them out?
No, we just kicked them out. And I think that would have been, we were going to do it again this year, but again, 2021 wasn't the most ideal year for it. We were going to do the exact same thing this year, and probably would have paddocked them off then. But it just wasn't meant to be this year. So I think you would have got a lot more out of it if we would have paddocked and kind of forced them to clean up a little bit more, because it was a perfect year for it.
Yeah, and in my experience, I know we're going to come back and talk about this in the end, but where there was vetch paddocking off it, I bet we added 40% of our grazing, because otherwise they just go through and they pick out all the damn vetch, and then they have nothing to balance, that high carbon corn residue with. If we keep them paddocked and always have them to have that digestible protein and vetch, they're a nice complement, the corn and the hairy vetch together. But with that being said, I did the same thing this year because it didn't matter. The grasshoppers wiped out all the vetch anyway. So we're calling this the intercropping trial, Stu, because I told you nothing's a failure if you learn from it. So I know this is a failed corn crop, but just talk about what you did and kind of the things you learned.
Yeah, so this is 2019, and I mean, this is early on in our in kind of the regenerative path that we've gone down. And it was July 5th, and we had a corn crop that was, we had hairpinning problems, poor germination, gophers were a hell of an issue. And I said to you, this is what we're going to try. And you said, hey, maybe it'll work. I don't know. So
I think I said probably not, but you should try it anyway.
Yeah. What did I have to lose? I had nothing. We had nothing to lose at that point because we didn't think we had a corn crop. So anyways, what ended up happening was July 5th, we have this corn crop. I tried to get somebody into kind of seed into it, and they wouldn't do it. And they said I was crazy. So I went and rented the Velmar from Double Diamond and filled it up with every seed I could find on the farm. I think there was oats, hairy vetch, barley, peas, ryegrass, mustard, everything I could find. Anyways, I went out there, broadcasted it on, heavy harrowed it twice. We got lucky enough, we got a rain right after that. And wherever there was a bare spot, this crop just took off, and it filled out. And it was 2019, so we got that snow, and we didn't get it silage before. And I'm curious what it would have been like to try and chop it before the snow knocked down all the cover crop in between, because I can't imagine us growing more biomass than we did that year on that piece of land. Yeah,
the funny thing is like how far we've all come, but in this scenario, the warm season plant was sown 2 months before all the cool season plants, and it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
and it was.
Yeah, I think like my theory is, I guess with the peas, because we were talking about like the peas will do nothing, but I kind of wonder if just because the corn had gotten up above it, if it shaded them enough and kept them cooler, and they were able to thrive. And then they searched for the sunlight, and yeah, the peas did really well, and so did everything else. So
preaching to the converted, my friend. So yeah, we got a couple different things going on here for you, Stu. I know this is you combining a barley pea crop, but I'd like you to also just touch on your oats underseeded to Italian ryegrass as well. We got some numbers there.
Yeah,
whichever you want.
I got a new phone this year, so I didn't get very many good pictures of anything. So it's I went back in the archives and found this one. But we had oats, and it was, you know, looking kind of shitty going into the spring. So we wanted to make sure that we had some extra grazing going into fall. So on 80 acres, we undersowed our oats with I think it was 6 pounds of ryegrass, which again might have been a little high, but anyways, it worked out well. Can't remember what day we seeded that, but yeah, we put 100 bred heifers on that. They grazed 36 days on 80 acres. We did put up fences, temporary fences on that to try and stagger their grazing. I think if we were taking it a little more serious, we could have even stretched it even further. The crop was no hell, but it was going to be no hell whether we had ryegrass seeded underneath it or not, because there was no rain. The oats kind of figured out what it was going to do in June, and by the time we got rain, the yield was kind of decided. So, but when that ryegrass came out,
I just want to touch on, sorry to interrupt, Stu, this point, just because it was a really bad year. Like, it was dry. It wasn't good for the oats. It wasn't good for the underseeded Italian ryegrass. But even in those poor conditions, you know, 36 days, 100 bred heifers for 36 days. We just did the math down there. In cost savings versus feeding them a winter forage at 7.5 cents a day, it's like $8,000 on 80 acres, $100 an acre. Show me a fungicide or a seed treatment or a insecticide that can give you that type of return. And from a management standpoint, nothing different. You sprayed the same herbicide you were going to, the same fungicide was applied, same poundage for the oats. It's like for the $5 an acre it costs to get something alive and growing. I mean, just look at the return that can bring, you know, if you have the animals to graze it. And there's lots of people on here tonight that don't have cows. Your neighbor's cows would love to eat that cover crop. They would absolutely love it. And like, what an amazing way to, to share resources. And I mean, straight up make some money. Like, a new seed variety comes out 5 bushels the acre better, or 3 bushels the acre better than its competitor. You know, it's the highest seller and you can't get it because it's sold out. Well, it's not going to yield near the return that simple practice in a rough year, what that offered to you guys. So I'm like, I put the numbers in there for the reason where even on a bad year, like, look how low your risk is.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're hesitant about, you want to meet yield or whatever, or you want to have a clean field, depending on what your goal is, it's just such an easy thing to throw in the drill and put it down as you're going out there. And like you said, there's I mean, if I had a neighbor that was wanting me to graze cows out there, it'd be a no-brainer. It's such an easy thing to, because it's saving my pastures for the next year.
He should be jacked. You're giving him, or they should be jacked. You're giving them $1.18 a day, and you should be jacked. You're not feeding cows winter forage hay. That is the biggest win-win of them all. But everyone hates it.
For sure. But we'll just, if we work together a little more, I think some of these problems can be solved pretty quickly.
I couldn't agree more. Great job, my friend. Stick around for question time. We got some rolling in here. Nick, if you want to unmute yourself and come on. Beauty. So my very good friend Nick Boundy from Cartwright, Manitoba. Nick is a former organic farmer. Can I say that, Nick? I think I can.
Yeah, you can say that.
Regeneratively minded conventional farmer and just a really smart guy. He's got some cows, got into sheep. He's been intercropping for years. So Nick, we talked about this before, but we're going to kind of dive in a little bit more to the concept and kind of the biological aspect as well as the grazing, reducing feed costs, but talking about CDN and start the benefits that extended grazing, if managed properly, can have on the soil. So Nick, why don't you talk about your family quick and your farming operation, and we'll get right into her, bud.
You betcha. Thanks, Joe. So yeah, this is me, my wife, and our son Jace. It's Angela, my wife. We also have a 4-month-old Macy. So we recently moved to Cartwright. We were farming at Boisevane. As you said, we were farming organic over there. My parents decided they wanted to retire, so my wife and I decided we liked the community of Cartwright. We wanted to stay around here, so ended up selling the farm and buying over here. So a lot of the pictures I have are from the organic farm. I'll kind of point them out just to make it clear, and then now too, what we're doing is we're farming a little different over here. We're not doing organic, we're doing conventional. So this is on our new land at Cartwright. This was this fall. And this is the picture on the left is basically fall rye cover crop. So we had extremely dry year. We planted oats. So this was completely new to us land. This land last year was actually corn deep disked. So this spring we harrowed it. It was just like the desert. No biological activity, no moisture, no nothing. So we grew an oat crop. We did some nitrogen trials. We did 0N, half N, and full nitrogen trials on those oats. There was absolutely no yield difference.
Because nitrogen wasn't the limiting factor last year, Nick.
Correct. Rain and biological function was a limiting factor last year. So correct. What happened was the soil dried out. The biology was basically laying dormant. It couldn't take that nitrogen and provide it to the plant. So because of that, I already had planned, once I saw that oat crop, that I needed to get a living root in the ground. That living root of that rye is going to capture that nitrogen, so it won't be lost. It's going to cycle it back for the next year. And it's also, my goal is to get this soil back to health as quickly as possible. So to do that, you need a living root. You need to keep energy flowing into the soil. You need to keep photosynthesis going, and you need root exudates in the soil. If you don't do those things,
I'm going to be a naysayer here, because literally my own father asked me this question all the time, and I'm like, do you know what I do for a living? But okay, Nick, that rye is using nitrogen to grow and stay alive, and you're gonna soil test that this fall, and it's gonna come back super low nitrogen. Are you not concerned about this?
No. So I'm more concerned about getting the biology functioning. That's my number one. I got to get that biology functioning, and to do that, you need the living root. The rye will take up some nitrogen. That nitrogen will be cycled back around, but I can plan for that moving forward too. So yeah,
it's like I tell Dad. I mean, yes, it's using nitrogen, but that plant's not hopping on a Greyhound bus and heading to the neighbor's field. It's going to die right there and cycle those minerals.
Right, exactly.
The way Mother Nature intended, both from biological activity, but how about this biological activity, those four-legged things that are roaming your fields?
Yeah, they're cycling some nutrients there. So the field behind them is actually a sunflower field that we planted some vetch in underneath. It didn't do so well this year with the drought, as everybody else's vetch was the same way. But we did learn nonetheless. So as I said, this land was deep disked. It's the same half section. This land was deep disked in the fall. The guy actually deep disked through some native prairie, never sprayed it out, just deep disked through it. So when I planted the sunflowers, I planted them right in. I didn't know what I was getting into. So I just planted them in there and all's good. And harvesting, we found a solid mat of prairie grass and perfect sunflower plants with heads the size of pie plates. So it gave us an education to the fact that sunflowers don't mind competition, right? So there's another opportunity. What plants can we select to add as much biodiversity, to get as much photosynthetic energy into the soil as possible? So with sunflowers, our goal now is to get as much of a cover crop under there as we possibly can, because now we've seen that they can compete in a drought. So
with that being said, a cautionary tale, my sunflowers are still standing out there. And so
yeah.
All right, so we're going to dive into kind of the grazing cover crops aspect, and I swear we're going to bring this back around to extended grazing and the value grazing cover crops can bring. But Nick, you referenced energy flow in the soil enough, so why don't you just touch on a bit, and I'll throw in some 2 cents too. Why on the left and the chart on the right, why those two make sense in what you're doing with the cows here?
Yeah, so right here, we're trying to balance the C to N as much as possible. The chart on the right, you can see 24:1 is where you want your basically where you want your carbon to nitrogen to be. That's the ideal microbial diet. So we're trying to feed that. We're trying to create a nice lush plant, which is going to have a pretty low C to N ratio. We're going to get that through the cow. The cow is going to get good digestion out of it. She's going to do really well, and we're going to cycle a pile of nutrients back. So yeah, that's basically where. What else do you want to touch on that, Joe?
I think that's good. Just the importance of, well, I mean, what I say when I give a presentation is like, those cows, they are biology. If you know that a ruminant animal is totally dependent on other cells outside of itself. It's dependent on other organisms for digestion. So if your animals are going to find that lush and tasty and very digestible and be healthy, productive animals, the soil biology is going to do the exact same thing. They're two and of the same. They come from the same the same place. Like the cow's rumen is developed by the soil. That's where the biology comes from.
Yeah. The other side of that too is that we're laying. Oh, here's a good picture of this too. So we're also laying all that down on the soil, right? So we need to create that same diet for the biology, like you're talking. And the other thing is to create the environment. So with this field here in particular, so this wasn't an organic field. This is an organic situation. This is our basically a green manure crop. So this is the field needing to rebuild nitrogen. So we're wanting to lay down green material, create a nice mat. The purpose of that, for as far as biology goes in the soil, is you create the environment. You've created a cool soil environment. You've took the sunlight away, so the sunlight's not beating down on the ground. You're retaining moisture, and then that's just the perfect environment to build soil health and just move things forward really quickly. And
to stay on topic, Nick, like, what does this look like? Like, this would be, I'm assuming, like mid to late July. What does this crop look like, when we're talking about the extended grazing season? The benefit, I mean, a lot of organic producers would plow this in the ground, but why is this a more beneficial practice for that rebounding and added growth come fall? I mean, yes, from a soil perspective, but just from a regrowth perspective of adding value to your cattle operation.
Yeah, so for the cows, we found that we could, even in an organic situation, which is typically a little less biomass than you're going to be conventionally, we could easily add $50 of feed back to the cattle versus working it all in. And you're still getting the nutrient benefit of cycling it back through. And then we are also allowing, so if we're growing all green manures, we could grow some warm seasons, we grow some cool seasons. We could easily get 30 days of grazing in the middle of summer, and that would allow our perennial pastures to to get ahead, get some growth. We were doing rotational grazing and whatever too. We weren't really doing. We got lots of over there. We had lots of bush pasture, so we couldn't really do super high stock density grazing on that. But it would allow us a rest period. It would allow us to let the grass recover, and then that would also allow us to increase our stocking. So we could get another. We were carrying another. So we started off about 60 head, and we could carry 100 head easily just by grazing our green manures on our pasture, like with our pastures as well. So that was part of the economics on it. It made us a lot more profitable on the livestock side by doing that.
And then what did you see as far as the like kind of the late fall grazing? Like at what point, I guess, like the logistics of it, Nick, like the regrowth, were you fencing it off? When were you taking that regrowth? How much snow would they dig through to get to it?
Yeah, we were doing a little bit of the regrowth. The biggest kicker for us in the organic was controlling the perennial weeds. Right. So we would end up the odd field we'd have to work or something, it'd mess us up totally. So now I'm really excited with the regenerative and the conventional, getting back to conventional so as we can make more opportunities of that. The growth was also less, I would say, on the because this is a green manure. We had already, we hadn't been, a lot of the time we hadn't done a good enough job at having enough legumes in the mixes before we got to this point. And so the growth would be delayed after this versus a soil that's constantly in shape with intercrops and just moving along steadily. So we had some issues there with that. But yeah, the regrow, like the sorghum would definitely regrow, vetch would regrow good. So yeah, we could get decent regrowth on that too, for sure.
Well, I think we got, this is a photo of your grazing cover crops. I was going to segue into your last slide, but if you got anything to add here as well, Nick, go for it.
Yeah, so this one, I guess I just wanted to add to this that this was a cool season. We quite often started grazing too late. That was the first mistake we made, was we started grazing too late in the season, and then the crop was too mature on us, which you'll see on the next slide. But this particular scenario here was we only grazed about 30%, utilized 30%, and we laid down 70%. So we were going, this was in a green manure organic situation, and we are just going for nitrogen to try to build our soils back. So in a low nitrogen soil. So that's basically what that guy's all about. And then this is grazing too late. so this was one of our early experiments, and it's essentially the same field on the different end. So the slide previous, the one end of the field, the forage peas really did well. The opposite end of the field, the oats took over. And we should have grazed it in reverse. We should have started at the end of oats and worked our way over. But here's another seed end talk, right? So that end of the field versus this end of the field where the oats are mature, we have a lot less nitrogen available. We weren't able to put the same blanket down on the ground to cover the soil, and you could see it in the crops previous that this wasn't adequate. So.
You broke up there, Nick? I was going to ask, did you see it in the previous year?
Yeah. So in the previous year, we did notice there was some places where we had extremely good forage pea growth. We had Canada thistle. And then, so that was, I think that was just because we got too much nitrogen. We had an imbalance, collapse in aggregates, get compaction in layers of the soil, and then you get thistles. And then this end of the field was less growth, a bit more nitrogen starved, just because there just wasn't enough nitrogen. But it's just, that's how you learn, right? You want to see these things, see what actually is happening, see how the biology in the soil works, and observe. So
couldn't say it better, my friend. Well, you're sticking around for questions. Great job. Aaron, if you want to unmute yourself, turn your video on. So I'm proud to say this is my bull provider now. Aaron's got some nice looking cows, as you're going to see coming up. And I'll shameless plug, I'll give it for you, Aaron. I think still has some bulls available. 2-year-old, is it long 2-year-olds is the right term? And actually my brother's going up Sunday to pick one up. So yeah, Aaron, why don't you tell us about your farm, your system, kind of the concept and why you're doing these things. I know we had a lot of questions about stockpiled grass on the what do you want to learn from this webinar. So take it away, and I'll try and keep up and ask you questions along the way.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, so we farm near Shellmouth, Manitoba, which is up the Yellowhead Highway towards Yorkton. So we're very close to the border. If anybody knows where the ski hill is, Mississippi, we're very close to there. And we run a cow-calf beef operation. Our operation is 100% perennial production. So we don't do any grain cropping or cover cropping at the moment. Feed pricing going forward may change that. We'll see. Might get into that in our discussion here a little bit. But anyway, yeah, we got about 600 cows. We sell some breeding stock in the form of bulls. They're actually, we calve in May, so they're coming 2-year-olds in May, virgin 2-year-olds. We don't sell any yearlings, and we also sell some replacement heifers, and then sometimes we'll sell cows, just depending on the year. We also do a little bit of direct marketing of our beef. And yeah, that's pretty much our operation. There's 3 families involved. It's me, my brother, and my parents are still involved as well.
And your daughter started up a red Angus herd, right?
Correct. Yeah. My 2 daughters have red hair. And what's that?
Traders.
No, it's all good. We've actually, even before they started it, we talked about, there are certain people that just they love red animals, and they love the crossbreeding of red animals, and they won't use black bulls. So there's kind of an untapped market there that I think we needed to get into anyway. So yeah, but they're just starting small.
I'm honestly one of those people. We have a lot of red bulls and pretty much black herd, so I can empathize with your daughters.
Yeah.
So talk about how the winter feeding program's going on. I know this segues into what we're talking about, but yeah, just talk about your system. I'd love for you to get into kind of the bale grazing and buying forage, but take her away and I'll ask more questions as we go.
Back to the cow color though, a good cow is never the wrong color.
That's true.
That's very true. Okay. So yes. So this is our wintering program. We choose to bale graze. That's our preferred wintering method. We'll get into the grazing portion, which is by far more important because there's nothing biological going on here. It's in a frozen state. And so you really can't do anything, to change what's going on here. It's fed feed. So we feed for about, we budget for about 120 days. We wean our calves the first week of December, and then the cows go straight to the bale graze, and we budget 120 days. So they're basically there for the months of December, January, February, and March. We hope on most years that we can start grazing in the month of April. The last few years, we've even started at the end of March, but that's obviously not going to be possible this year. Me and Joe were having a conversation, and we're still hopeful that we may be grazing April 15th. But we'll see about that. Not too sure.
For context, Darren, you were talking about your goals 120 days from that Manitoba agriculture cost of production. Any idea what the average is, Manitoba average? For winter?
Yeah. Is it about 210?
I guess 210 as well. It's 195. I'm not honestly sure where, 195 doesn't seem like that many days when I drive around the countryside, but 80 days difference on 600 cows. Think of the, that's the difference between you making money and not making money in a year.
Yeah, it's huge. I just used 210 because 7 months. I thought I'd probably do that. Yeah. But yeah.
Anyway, so you bale graze and you must have terrible waste. Tell us about it.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Flip that slide. We get embarrassed. It's terrible.
What do they call that? Turd surfing or turd sifting?
Turd sifting. That happens in the last 3 to 4 days of the bale graze because they really don't have a lot those last 3 days. They're just sort of, but it's amazing. They'll just use their nose and they'll just sift through what residue's there, and they're picking crumbs.
I mean, and I was out in ours Sunday. I was moving a whole bunch of bales for a new paddock, and it's like I walk where a hay bale is, and I'm like, I have never seen a hay bale cleaned up this good in a corral ever before. It actually is amazing if the feed quality is good, how well they clean it up.
That's the caveat there, probably. I mean, if you're trying to use poor quality feeds, you can't get that. And we strategically use, we don't want dairy quality feed or anything. It has to be decent quality feed, because we do use our bale grazing as a tool to actually put a little bit of condition on our cattle in that 120-day period, because of their nutritional plane maybe not being met in the months of November prior to bale grazing, and then in the month of April and the start of May. So you're trying to balance everything out, and sometimes they're not getting everything that they should be, but it's give and take throughout the year, right?
I mean, my theory is, and I think we have the same thing, it's just keeping the peaks and valleys longer. So Owen, who's probably on the webinar tonight, said to me, he's like, how often a cow who's fed every day is hungry? Once a day. A cow that's fed every 21 days is hungry, 1 or maybe 2 days per cycle. But it's like letting that gut biology adjust to the feed stuffs, and giving it the proper time to adjust accordingly and maximize feed efficiency.
Oh, totally. And they self-regulate. They really do.
Yeah.
They're very content. Like when cattle get fed once a day, they lose their minds. The feed truck comes and that's all they're focused on. And it just really, it just upsets their state of, kind of contentness or equilibrium, right? It's much better if they just have feed in front of them and just do their own thing. But
I had an argument not an argument, I had a discussion with a buddy. I just did that cost of production budget a few weeks ago or whatever. I was actually texting with you about it. For the cost nowadays of fuel, time, depreciation, equipment, repair, our animals can waste one pile of feed and cover those costs. And at the very least, I've got those minerals on my land, but it's just something, it's why I don't mean to harp on it, but why I think it's so important that cattle producers do a budget. So, you can put real numbers and real values to some of these practices that we do that frankly cost us too much money, because there ain't a whole lot left at the end of the day if you're selling to the commodity market.
Yeah.
So let's talk about stockpiled grass. I know there's a pile of interest. Talk about when you start, what you look for, nutritional value. I know your next slide's about calving on stockpiled forage, which I have some experiences as well, but tell us about yours.
Sure. Well, we rely on stockpiled grass. It's part of our forage resource management system. So you can't just hope to have stockpiled grass. It has to be part of your balancing of your land base and what the forage production can be on that land base. So we have the equivalent of about like 2 to 2.5 months of forage production that we leave on the land. We don't bale it. And so the frost comes along, locks in the nutritional value, and then it's there for October, November, and then we start feeding in December. And then in spring, when the snow is your critical factor, and temperature as well, but mostly snow. When that snow is gone, your forage is exposed and it's ready to go. So a key to stockpiled grass is diversity. The more the merrier. So as many types of grass species you can have, as many legumes as you can. It just makes it healthier for the animals and the soil. And like this is a picture, I believe, in I think late April. And so I think the snow had melted that year, and then this is just kind of when it snows afterwards. So
Aaron, just talk about what are we looking at here? When would this have been grazed last? Do you does the stockpiled paddock get stockpiled grazed every year, or do you try and get a graze in the year and have regrowth? Like, what is the strategy? How far are you planning for? How far out are you planning this?
Yeah, so the stockpiled, we don't have designated stockpiled grass paddocks, so we're constantly changing those. Like every year, it's a different stockpiled grass paddock, and then we do that on purpose, just for, we really believe in like disruptive planned grazing. So you're constantly changing, when you're grazing it, how mature it is when you're grazing it, what animals are going in there, what the density or intensity of your graze is. We're constantly changing that, and we think it's like hugely beneficial. And so the stockpiled grass paddocks, we're basically not grazing them past around like June 1st to June 15th of every year. So those paddocks will not get grazed after those dates. And then that will be our stockpiled grass paddocks.
Just to touch on what Aaron said about what is it called? I referenced the Alan Williams talking about it. He's got a great video on YouTube if you guys want to watch. Is it the Chaos Graze? But like the same thing you were talking about. I assume it's just a different name, but like the idea of like the randomness of it all of it all and constantly changing. So don't make it. That's I was leading you to that question where it was like, some practices, and I think they are more beneficial than, conventional grazing, but quite often, that's the calving pasture that gets stockpiled grazed. And, we start grazing on that paddock and we cycle the cows like this, what they're finding some of the data is now. And I would agree with you, Aaron. After I watched that Alan Williams video, we did our exact system in reverse the following year. So I definitely think there is something to the randomness of it all. I don't know the science behind it, but I'm sure there's sound stuff to it.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the science either, but I mean, it's just like if you like highly intensive graze something, it kind of shocks it, it gives it that jump start. And if you're constantly doing that with your grazing management practices, it's wild what it can do for the grass and the soil. It really is.
I agree.
Yeah.
So talk about calving. What are you supplementing these cows? Surely they can't just be eating stockpiled grass.
Well, we give them some water, and salt and mineral. No, that's what we don't supplement them. We do at times a little bit strategically, but really not. If our forage resource is decent and they're in decent body condition, we don't really at all. We don't worry too much about it. If they're in good condition, like I said, in that month of, April 1st to May 1st or to May 15th, even that 45-day window, they can afford to lose a little bit of weight because, the green grass is coming and they'll gain it back after that. And actually, even May 1st to May 15th, you don't see any green. But if you pull back some of that dry matter, there's green down there. So every mouthful they'll take in, and they'll find that green stuff too. So it's kind of like they're mixing their own ration in a way.
They're balancing their own C/N ratio. Every bite to get the fresh, lush stuff, you gotta have a bite of the dried out stuff. And in my experience, those cows blow up like ticks. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then another benefit of grazing and calving in this type of stockpile grass is if you we start calving April 25th. Most of our calves are born in the month of May, but strategic, and we didn't really do this on purpose to start with, but we noticed that it's a benefit. If the nutritional plane is a little bit lower just before calving, you'll have less calving difficulties. Like they just pop out, calves pop up, like it's beautiful.
Well, we'll come back to this in the question period, but I know Stu has he brought that to my attention. I forget who exactly the article was by or the video or the book he read, but yeah, talking about later in the third trimester, actually lowering your feed quality to achieve the goal, exactly what you just said. So just Aaron, to touch a little bit more on this. So you're calving on stockpiled grass. Like, are you paddocking these off? How do you move cows with young calves? How long are they on the stockpiled grass, and when do you get them off?
Yeah, so we're not nearly as intensive in the calving period. We slow it down. So we're moving in the calving period kind of every 5 to 7 days it's a lot slower. Like when the grass is ramped up and later on in the growing season, we're moving every 2 to 4 days, sometimes even more. But we sacrifice a little bit in spring just because of the calving and the pairing and just not putting so much stress on the moving. And the paddocks are a little bit bigger. We're not splitting them with temporary wire as much. So we do not move as much during calving period.
So like, I'm trying to think how to phrase this, because I know you just told me that you've got a randomized grazing system, but like in theory, if this, I mean, I can see calves out there. If this was the 10th of May, like when would you generally expect to come back and graze this? Or does it just literally depend on how much forage you got and like the year?
Yeah, a lot. But I mean, I say we on our land base, we average about 1.5 times over in a year. Some stuff gets once a year, some stuff as much as 3, but 1.5 over on average is about what we do on our operation.
So this, like, you might come and graze this again in fall if it's not going to be stockpiled for next year.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
So tell us about the drought. I was at your place in the heart of the drought, and it did not seem very droughty around your place.
I actually looked at this picture that I sent you. That's actually from 2017. That's not last year.
Oh,
yeah, that's okay though. It
was green. Take my word for it. I can show pictures from Aaron's place this year.
Yeah. Well, it was dry here this year too, but not nearly to the extent I think of southern Manitoba and obviously the Interlake. We did get some timely rains, but it was below average, and we didn't. I think our first rains were, I don't even know when it was. It was a major rainfall event, but it was later. Like we got off to a really slow start. But when you stockpile grass, you're covering the soil. There's not bare soil, so you're protecting it. It's not black. It's not drying out your soil. Your soil's healthier. Your water cycle's better. Your water holding capacity is better. So all those things just make your forage grazing lands more resilient to drought. Like it's, we were affected this year, but not nearly as much as if you're not a rotational grazer. Like if you're a seasonal grazer, it was an ugly year around here too. I mean, things just dried up quick and the regrowth was not there. So the key is the recovery, so.
And the photo you're going to enter in magazines. This was from this year, right?
This was from this year. Yeah. So I think you guys were here not too far before or after this picture was taken.
It looked a lot like this when we were there. Pretty gorgeous.
Yeah.
You should honestly, I don't tell anyone this, but you should invest in a horse and ride around down there. Like that just seems meant to be, doesn't it?
Maybe. I'm not much of a cowboy though. But no, like this is like not all our lands look like this. This is like grazing utopia here, but this is our bottom land. So this is like the valley bottom of the Assiniboine. And so it's highly fertile, silty loam soil. And like this stuff now we're grazing this 3 times a year just because you can't really hurt it. Like this stuff doesn't need the recovery like our top land does. Yeah. And it's highly productive. And if you leave it too long, you're either going to have to actually cut it for hay or it gets a little too rank. So more grazing is better than less grazing. So we're doing this stuff about 3 times a year. And it's not necessarily the most nutritious grass, but there's a lot of it. And this is the stuff we've added some aerial alfalfa to over the years, and it's really helped as well.
You know what? Aaron, that actually is really interesting. And honestly, I haven't heard of that a ton of success till I was at your guys' place. Why don't you just touch on quick? I know this doesn't have a whole lot to do with elongating the grazing days, but it is an idea we get asked about a lot. Why don't you talk about your guys' experience with it and how it's worked out for you?
Okay, well, just to back it up a little bit, like these particular lands used to be our hay production land. So we used to hay this stuff. It was highly productive. Probably, you could average 4 to 5 bales an acre off this stuff. When did the flooding start? Like in 2005 in the Assiniboine, and there was multiple years of extended flooding. This land was underwater for long periods of time. Anything that was tame got completely, it couldn't withstand the constant flooding. And we got some relief from flooding. We actually restored this land traditionally to tame forage again. And it was good for about 2 years, and then we got flooded again. And we just decided to leave it. And what came back was just the grasses that could tolerate the wetness. So the reed canary, quackgrass, alsite clover, just anything that was really flood tolerant. And then because those lands were being constantly flooded, our hay production sort of got taken away. So we decided we had to buy hay. And that's when we made a shift to buying hay, just because out of necessity. And then when this land came back and there was some production to it, we just decided, well, we're going to continue buying hay. Let's graze this land. So we started grazing it. And just nutritionally, it was subpar. The production was there. So we just decided to fly on alfalfa at 10 pounds an acre with just an aerial applicator. And we let the cows punch it in. And it took probably 2 to 3 years to really establish. There was alfalfa there, but it was small and spindly, and we weren't sure exactly, what kind of plants they'd turn into. But over time, this stuff now looks like a hayfield at times. The alfalfa is that established now.
Yeah, I would say probably 40 to 50% of your plant biomass would be alfalfa down there when we were there anyway.
Yeah, I'd agree. There are places that are a little wetter than others that don't have as much, so it's variable. But yeah, I'd agree with that. It worked really well, and I wouldn't say that this is probably best case scenario to how an aerial application of alfalfa would work. Really,
it's the best one I've seen. But you did. And now we're dragging this out, but you did do some on your up top kind of drier land as well, didn't you?
Yeah, we have a little bit. Yeah, and it's worked too. Not as good, and it's slower, but it's working as well. And we're going to continue to do that. So as part of our kind of rejuvenation and, for just improving our forages over time, you're basically just adding to the seed bank, and strategically with legumes is what you're doing. So.
All right, let's talk about fall grazing.
Yeah. So there's a lot of alfalfa here. This is the same land as the previous slide. And so you could see that the frost was a month or two before that, month and a half. So we come through here and we graze this in fall. We grazed our toplands in fall as well. But the challenge with the fall grazing is the water at times, because certain years in November, if it's cold enough, that we can have icing issues in the river. So that's kind of our limiting factor. So we do like to be off the bottom lands by around this time, just so we don't have to run into icing river issues. But yeah, the cattle are grazing, no supplementation. We do sometimes supplement closer to weaning. So the last 2 weeks in November, we will roll out some bales, and it's more to get the calves accustomed to eating some hay, some dry hay, more than anything. So making that transition and making weaning a little bit easier.
Well, this next photo is interesting here because clearly there are calves on the cow, and those don't look like ideal grazing conditions.
No, but yeah, this is about, if that date is accurate there, that's about 3 weeks pre-weaning. And, they're just down there, and I think we just moved them in to this new paddock. We use a lot of temporary electric fencing to split these paddocks down there. And it's kind of funny when you move them into the new paddock, that's just what you see. Every head is down. Like they're mowing. Our biological machinery in action. Like that's what it is. So
it's beautiful. Now, I know you guys had the same as us. We're buried in snow. Why don't you talk about when you started feeding, like this year? Like it's almost two extremes. Like this year on our farm, we started feeding earlier than we have in years. And last year we didn't start feeding until I think it was the 3rd of February. So why don't you talk about like the difference in the past 2 years, what you saw as far as when you had to start supplementing with winter forage?
Actually, it wasn't that different for us. This year we started, so we weaned first week of December. We actually kicked the cows out, and we got another, I think, 10 days of grazing. So they went up to the bale grazing around December 15th this year. It was a little bit later than normal. Couple factors there. It wasn't as dry here, so we had the stockpile grass to do it, but we were tight on feed. So we needed to kind of get as much out of our what was our forage resource that wasn't like baled up, because we knew that our winter feed supply was a little bit tight. So we wanted to kind of manage that appropriately.
And how much, like, I know you like, you wouldn't recommend anyone doing this. Like your cows were raised in this system and raised to do this, but like how much snow, like how much forage are they utilizing and say, I don't know, you would have had a foot of snow they would have been grazing in?
What time of the year? When do you mean?
Like early December this year.
No, the snow never really came. I think it was shortly after bale grazing when we took them up there. I do have some pictures of when we kicked them back out after weaning, and there wasn't a ton of snow there.
No.
But like if it's fresh snow that's not like rock hard, like right now, your drifts are so hard. I mean, you see the deer are all in the bale stacks. They can't even dig down. The snow is just so hard. But in December, when you're getting fresh snows, it's quite powdery. It's loose. It's not hard as a rock. They just dig around with their nose and find it. So that's not a real limiting factor unless you got a massive dump, like in December. Like I'm talking 2 feet.
So I got a question as a naysayer. Let's say, because right, you guys are planning to be grazing right like May 1st at the latest. Like what if we got
latest? Yeah.
What if we got conditions that look a lot like this for another month? Like what would your plan be?
Oh, to source some more straw because you can't afford hay. No, I'm not overly worried about it. I think we're good until about April 15th for sure on feed. And so that's a month. A lot can change in a month.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, if it
so what percentage of your grazing would be out there in stockpiled form currently? Like how many acres would you say you're going to get good grazing out of in the month of May this year?
In the month of May, about 200 acres worth.
And then I know this will vary, but like how long has that land been resting for? Like would it have been grazed in the following spring or the following summer? I know you had a deadline June 15th. It's just anything that was grazed before that deadline. Pretty
much, yeah. Anything that was either rested longer than that or grazed up to June 15th, those will be all. And then they won't all be exactly the same in terms of what's there for production in terms of tonnage, like biomass.
And what do you think? How does it look this year as far as tonnage or biomass as compared to like last year?
Pretty similar. Yeah, because we actually did get a pretty decent fall moisture situation here. So there was some pretty decent regrowth. So we're sitting about the same. Yeah.
Good stuff. I think that's all for you for now, Aaron, but I'm going to do just a couple ideas that we do on our farm here quick. And then we're going to open it up for questions. I got some questions written down. Trav's writing down questions as well. Yeah, if you guys tune into this webinar, most of you have heard these ideas. We did a lot with this year just because everything was so dry and looked so awful. We did a lot with warm season blends, and frankly, it saved us. Like Stu was saying, it saved them. What you're looking at right here saved us. We had the warm season plants that held on through the drought, and then when we did get some precipitation come fall, we were grazing. And swath grazing. This isn't my picture. This is Owen's, but we did much the same. Just a really cheap way when we had virtually no biomass growth. Come July, it really did. It was the biomass that they consumed October, November, and a decent part of December as well with the swath grazing. So yeah, this is warm season swath grazing. Last year, kind of how I missed last year, other than the drought. But this was February 2nd, the last. We hit our goal, which was, I believe the cows were grazing winter forage 90 days, which, as I pointed out to you, it was probably a profitable year with cows, even at the current commodity prices. And then to touch on the intercrops, I know that we get asked a ton from mixed grain and cattle guys, and we'll touch more on the questions, I'm sure, about intercropping this stuff. So this was a really easy one that we get asked a lot about. This was an oat and hairy vetch intercrop, and this was the straw we baled out of the back of the combine. So another way to reduce our forage need or dedicated winter forage acres is by starting to double up some of these grain production and cattle production, kind of maximizing the waste products from each enterprise. And then this was last year as well. This was January 12th, but I think something that farms should seriously look into, especially mixed grain and cattle farms, which is growing grass seed production. What a phenomenal way to, I mean, the price is competitive. It's a really short season crop, pretty low risk. And if we're talking annual ryegrass or perennial ryegrass, any precipitation in the fall, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. Literally, these cows had access to bale grazing, and they refused and just the snow kept staying away, and they kept grazing. And like I say, 12th of January, we didn't start feeding till February. So, I mean, if on 250 cows, which is what we have, if we're saving $2 a day, that's $500 a day for 3 months. You know, that's probably the only profit I'm going to make in the cattle industry in that year anyway. So that is all we got as far as presentations. So again, if you guys want to ask these guys questions, it goes in the Q&A and not the questions. But I'm going to open it up with a question I got for all of you. So if you guys want to unmute yourself and then turn on your videos. So maybe we'll start, Stu, you've been sitting the longest, so we'll start Stu, Nick, Aaron. In the next 3 years, again, keep in mind the topic, which is extending winter forage. In the next 3 to 5 years, what's an idea you have in your head you think is really going to work or really make a difference as far as reducing your forage cost? Right, that can be whether that's, for example, I want to talk about electric GPS collars, but it can be intercropping. Aaron, of course, I'm sure you got lots of ideas, and Nick, I know you're an ideas guy. So Stu, talk about what you're excited about and see the potential you see here from a fall grazing standpoint.
Yeah, opening up here, sitting long enough here, my mind's going to take a little bit to get going, I guess. So I don't know. I think for us, maybe figuring out stocking rates and kind of matching them up with our pasture acres and kind of, you know, trying to do something more on what Aaron is doing and extending our pasture as far as we can and having a little more stockpiled. I think that's just a simple, very good idea to do. But yeah, we're going to continue to do intercrops. We're going to continue to grow, you know, cash crops underseeded to you know, crops that we can graze in the fall. Try and push that as far as we can. You know, I'm pretty lucky in the area that I am in, because I know my neighbor's probably on here, Don Guilford, and he keeps telling me that doesn't want to feed until December, and I am competitive, and I kind of want to keep up with Don. So I'm going to keep pushing that and you know, keep learning as much as you can.
Good stuff. Nick, how about you?
For me right now, the closest one is the sunflowers, really trying to maximize growth underneath them. Not so much focusing on the sunflower yield, but focusing more on the forage, what we can create there, and grazing it standing in the fall. And then after that, doing bale grazing and bit of swath grazing, what have you, after that. But yeah, but I can see lots of potential with those sunflowers. Man, oh man, when I can see that them grow up in that prairie grass, like, holy smokes, I was kind of taken away by that one. So got to make most of that one.
This is a corn example, but we direct seeded some corn and vetch directly into sprayed out prairie grass. And on a quarter section, 155 acres, the grasshoppers wiped out 100% of the vetch, 100%. There was virtually no plants left. 5 acres where we direct seeded into prairie grass, there was every vetch plant was there in a drought. It was like, it was healthy, lush. Like, there's something to this. Very clearly, yeah. There's something to this. Anyway, yeah, we got a great question I want to get to, but Aaron, why don't you talk about, like, is your system perfect, or what are you looking to change in the next 3 to 5 years?
No system's perfect. I think we've got to a good place where we're at in terms of, managing it and kind of perfecting what we're doing in our system. But I think we can still improve that. We can improve our grazing management. We can improve the forage production. I should mention that my brother Shane is actually the grazing manager here. I post a lot of pictures on Twitter, but yeah, he's the guy that does the grazing planning. He's the guy that decides when we move them. So he deserves a lot of credit for that. What was I gonna? The hay, feeding of hay. Like with the prices that we're paying now, like we buy about 90% of our hay. I don't. Who knows what's going to happen with the prices of hay? But I mean, I don't think we can afford going forward to keep paying what the prices were this year. So we'll have to keep flexible on possibly ramping up our own production here of a little bit of our hay, whether that's, going to 30%, going to 50%. So we're going to have to keep our eye on that and just decide how we're going to manage that going forward. And with that, I mean, if we're haying a little bit more, we might have to reduce our number of cows a little bit. So we just want to stay flexible with what's going on out there and making sure that we're ahead of the curve, I guess.
Okay, and I got 2 things. I run this damn podcast, so I can say as many things as I want. I don't know if the webinar, not a podcast. One, I know I talk about it lots, but boy, am I excited about these GPS collars for animals. I just think there's so much potential for us to improve our native pasture land, but also to finally remove the excuse that I don't want to build a fence and maintain a fence. And we can actually start managing high production grain land and incentivizing these grain farms, like we talked about with the shitty Italian ryegrass under the oats. We improved that $100 an acre in a bad year. Well, now we got these collars. We don't need to put up a fence as long as there's a watering source. I just think there is so much potential where we can start managing everyone's land so much more efficiently. And the second thing to that is currently we sell our animals to the commodity market. And I am so sick of getting screwed over at the auction barn. It's not the auction barn's fault. It's this industry that we're in. So my theory currently is if I'm making no money on 250 cows, I might as well be making no money on 100 cows and actually aggressively putting in these practices. So I see Aaron calving on stockpiled grass. We get to do that on maybe 10 or 15% of our acres. I mean, that's just the direction we're going to do. I've seen it with my own eyes, how simple it is, how healthy the calves are, how healthy the cows are, how content they are. I just think we have to go that direction. It seems like a no-brainer. The deer do it. Why do we manage our livestock any different? I got a really great question here. Jagger, you're going to win the jacket because this is a fantastic question that we did not touch on. And we'll go in reverse order. Aaron, Nick, Stu, where do you guys strike a balance between supplementing versus pushing the herd a little harder so that the efficient cows in your herd can express themselves, specifically fall grazing, poor quality? That is a good question. Aaron, you want to start it off?
What the question is, how do you balance it?
Yeah, how do you balance, letting the good cows shine on poorer quality feed versus, okay, now it's time to supplement?
Well, I think you got to just pull the crutches. I mean, you got to have, genetics are key for sure. But you've got to have a rigorous culling program. Pressure your cattle, pressure them big time. And the cream will rise to the crop, and the ones that fall out of the system just aren't meant to be in that system. And over time, your herd will just improve. It sounds too simple, but it's very true.
Nick?
That's a great question. Great question. And good answer there from Aaron. This year we've been pushing ours quite a bit with just the feed shortage in general. So we've been feeding lots of straw, lots of corn stover, and
I can tell you can definitely pick those cows out. we've got probably 30% of our cows that look like they need to fall out and leave. But with that said, we did supplement a bit with some. Well, we ended up just this recently. We put some molasses on some bales just for something to do, just to make sure we're not lacking. We're actually starting calving right now, so we wanted to make sure we weren't lacking at calving. And so far the calves are jumping up to life and sucking within 20 minutes, half hour. So I think we're good there. It's a great thought though. I mean, I think we need to, on our herd, we need to drop out the 30%, get rid of them, send them out the road and say bye-bye and focus on those other genetics. But great thought from that guy asking that question.
Stu?
Yeah, no, I think we definitely tried to, drop a lot of things out very quickly, and there's some tough days, and I even today we're having discussions on, should we be supplementing more? Is it, do you think it's helping, or do they just need more feed, or whatever it is? But like Aaron said, I can't remember where I heard it, but you'll improve a herd a lot quicker by getting rid of the poor genetics rather than importing new genetics. And I think that's kind of where we're at. And but as far like it's been a tough winter. We need to have some live calves too, so we're starting to supplement a little bit more with minerals and other stuff that we're trying to get away from. So.
And I guess on our place, I mean, we have drastically shifted our cattle operation from thinking an open cow is a bad thing to an open cow means she doesn't belong in our herd and she doesn't fit in our system, and that is okay. So just having a different perspective on culling a cow, that culling that cow for a purpose means your cow herd got better. I think that is fundamental. As far as fall grazing, man, I mean, I used to tell people I just follow their shit and their condition and move. And almost now I follow their shit and their condition, and likely I can squeeze 3 or 4 more days out of them. And we rigorously cull. I think a fundamental flaw we used to do was, if 10% of our, the bottom 10% of our cow, or 90% of the cow herd looked fine and the bottom 10% looked not super, our instinct used to be feed 100% of the cows more feed, where the correct answer actually is keep the 90% that look good based on your system, axe the 10% that don't work, and then you get those genetics out of your herd. And again, this is such a good and thought-provoking question that if you guys have anything to add, please. But I've thought, like, we're in the same boat with winter rations where, our cows are probably on 40%, 45% dry hay, 40 to 45% straw, and then we supplement when the bale grazing gets down to straw with oat screenings. But I battle in my head is like, okay, so the bottom 10% doesn't look good, but maybe there's a reason for that where I've pushed the system too far. Yes, there's still 90% of the cows look excellent. So yeah, I don't think there's a correct answer. I think it's finding a balance in your cow herd and what you're comfortable with. And just 90% of what makes a profitable cow herd is, does she have a live calf and does she raise it to fall? So just make sure that's the focus. And then after that, focus on reducing your forage cost and keeping those animals on the land as much as possible. So here's another good one. How are you managing your grazing transitions and rotations? Have you experimented with any grazing management software? So I'll start this one off because I got to give a shout out to my brother as well, who's the unsung hero. He does, him and his partner, Derek, do 90% of our, we set out a plan at the start of the year, but they kind of enact the plan. They're both school teachers and enjoy reeling up wire, and boy, do I enjoy having them around. So we just kind of lay out a plan at the start of the year, kind of what we want to do. And basically it's up to them, how their schedule works and what the pasture looks like. But it's it's their management system. So yeah, I get to talk lots about rotational grazing and these systems. So I should give a shout out to the people that are actually doing it. Nick, why don't you start off, then we'll go with Aaron and then Stu. So just a reminder, the question was, managing your grazing transitions and rotations. And Nick, I know we had a discussion the other night about you got some sheep and you had some ideas about that. So feel free to include the sheep if you want. And has anyone done any grazing management software?
Yeah. So this year our grazing plan's all a little hectic with all the changes of everything we've done. Moving farm, we recently just bought another half section, which is the sheep farm. We just got the sheep a year ago. So that's all kind of up in limbo. I've got a grazing plan in place right now for the sheep. I got to put up fences this spring and get them out. And then I want to graze them with some cover crops in the fall. They're with the sheep, the lambs we usually wean like late November. So I want to try to get some good weight on them before weaning. So we'll do that on some cover crop. I'm toying with the idea of throwing the sheep in with bale grazing. We'll see how that goes or doesn't, but the bale grazing is going to be, I'm planning on bale grazing about 8 miles from home. So I'm kind of nervous about throwing sheep in there. So our grazing is kind of a little nuts right now with just all the changes in land and ownership and trying to figure out stalker rates and everything else to work to our numbers to what we have for grass. But I also just did holistic management last week, so that was great. That helped just to put the planning in perspective. So yeah, we got a good plan now and ready for that. I use it's on my phone. It's not Maya Grazing, it's the other one.
Pasture map. Yeah, I use that to draw out my maps, get my acres, and set my plan. So yeah, that's kind of handy I like that one. I don't know. There's other ones that are good too, but I kind of like it.
Stu?
Yeah, actually, before last week, I thought I had a pretty good handle on pasture plans. But yeah, Nick and I took that holistic management course together. And as far as like figuring out planned grazing, it really, hit home. It was great. And my wife, Shana, she'd be pissed if I didn't mention it, but she is pretty excited to do a lot of that stuff. So she's going to be helping out with that. But as far as software goes, I haven't used a whole lot, like as far as my phone or anything, but I go on the Manitoba Ag website and use their maps. You can draw your pastures and figure out acres and stuff like that. It's been a hell of a good resource. So yeah, I'm on that Manitoba Ag website quite a bit.
Aaron?
Yeah, we don't use any software. I know some guys using pasture map, some other grazers I know, and they're pretty happy with it. But we don't. We use Google Earth, Google Maps, and also that Manitoba Ag software as well. Just a lot for fencing plans and distances and kind of strategically planning your water infrastructure. Really good to get, the overhead satellite views. As far as the grazing management, we took a holistic management course a long time ago. Date myself here. We were in the mid 2000s when we took it. And a lot of it with the course is you do a grazing chart and you have all your land base on there and there's bars where you're staying in those paddocks. And we did that for the first few years after we took the course, but we've kind of just migrated away from that. And we just kind of old school. We just use notebooks and calendars. And believe it or not, a Twitter timeline is a very effective tool of going back and seeing what you've been doing and where your cattle were.
That means I'd have to be on Twitter.
Yeah, I guess it would. For me.
All right, guys, we got another really good question here. I've honestly thought about it. So Alicia you're going to get a hat. Regarding culling, so I guess, Aaron, it's your turn to go up first, then Stu, then Nick. Regarding culling, we are starting a herd purchased in the summer of 2021 and have this conversation often. In the first year or two, would you choose to focus on increasing your numbers in general and then culling in a few years down the road, or just cull right away?
Well, tough question.
Aaron, you're up. I know.
Yeah, it's a tough question because there's a lot of specifics that are going to apply to that operation that might not apply to anybody else, right? And I guess if you bought your herd, you want to expand more, or you at a number where you want to be at long term, that's going to be a factor as well. But yeah, and
okay, just to put yourself in her shoes, you're buying 50 cows and you want to get to 100. What's your focus here?
If you want to get to 100, so you want to expand your herd?
Yeah, you specifically though. Your cow herd sold. You bought 50 and you want to expand to 100. Are you tied to your program or are you, let's get to 100 and then we'll fix the problems?
Well, me personally, I'd be tied to the program. I mean, I think that's got to come first. Like I always say, like, are you a cow first rancher, or are you a systems first rancher? Like, where it's not about the cow, it's more about the system. The cow is just a harvesting tool within that system. Like, it's not about the cows. That being said, I guess it depends. Whatever you bought, I mean, how close is that to your ideal that fits within your management system? If they're like way off, well, then it's going to be a tough road and you're going to have to call a lot harder. If they're closer to what your ideal is in the system, you won't have to as much. So that's going to be a real factor as well. But I think sticking with the program is way beneficial for your long-term gain here.
Stu, so we got a little bit more context that Aaron didn't have. She bought 20 cows and is getting to 100, wants to get to 100. So what's your best advice?
Yeah, well, I guess from my experience, on the experience on our farm, yeah, you can, like Karen said, if you buy cows that are going to fit into your system, it'll be a lot easier to get to where you want to be a lot quicker. I think if you are going to try and change, that herd over to what you want, and yeah, I think you're gonna. For me, I'd probably stick with a system and call heavily and try and build it up for what I'm looking for in a herd.
Nick?
Oh, that's a good question, really. The economics is a tough one to figure on this too, right? Because I'm going to assume you're keeping a herd with sensible calving weights, so you don't have to have a heifer bull, because obviously with that number of cows, you can't have a heifer bull. But yeah, with that said, look at the economic side of it. I would. I'd see what's going to work. I've been talking with a few buddies lately about the options of trading cows, trying to buy something in at a lower value, get into good health, get it looking good, send her home, send her on again, have a calf out of her, maybe flip some cash. Maybe you can buy yourself into some cows that you really want that fit your program perfectly. Go to Nerbas Angus and buy some of their females. But,
I tried.
You tried, eh?
They are not for sale, or they're sold out.
Yeah. I guess I'm not as mature of a cattleman as I'd like to be, and I'm still learning a lot all the time. But I'd probably take that opportunity to try some different genetics out, see what works for you, and go from there. Because my idea of what's perfect, and then you go 5 years down the road and you realize it's not what you really want it to be. So,
I can I comment on
that? Yep.
Just one thing, if this isn't good for bull sales, but it takes a long time to change a herd with bulls. You're better off just to go try and source females that fit your program right off the start if you can find them that you can afford, rather than trying to improve them through a bull over time. Way quicker.
And just to speak on Aaron's point, so we had a cow herd. So our cow herd went from, like most, 60 cows in BSE, and we blew up to 200 or 250. Literally just kept whatever heifer around because you were going to give them away on the commodity market. And then that was our cow herd. And I mean, we have been extremely aggressive culling program and a very specific cow in mind for our system. And let me tell you, that is both time consuming and incredibly expensive. So I would suggest, cutting your loss on a heifer that, may look good and you don't have to go out and buy her, but selling her to the commodity market and going to someone who has a system that you want to replicate, I think is so important. Nothing I do is original. I get ideas from all of these guys that are on tonight and many others. I get to pick and choose what I want my system to be and what I like from their system that I can implement in mine. So my suggestion would be cut ties with something you're not super happy with and go out and find someone that has already implemented the system that you want to achieve, because those cows will make that transition so much easier. Got another beauty that I can't believe we didn't touch on at all, and we should have. So what do you use for water during fall and in winter? Is there water source in your field? Do you haul water, rely on snow? Also, do you use bedding during winter or portable windbreaks for shelter? Damn, those are some good questions. Stu, you got your cows out on the barren plains? No, of course they've got shelter, but why don't you talk about your fall grazing program and your winter program currently?
Yeah, so we're pretty lucky. We've got lots of trees around for shelter. Where the cows are currently are, they're there because we've got a good spring of water. It's a good water source, and that's why we're having trouble with our wells going dry where they were. So we moved them, and they've got a spring to drink off of all winter. In the fall, I have a brother and a father that were able to look after the water source right from the well, make sure it stayed thawed out, and made sure the cows had water. But we were like, yeah, again, we've got dugouts, and you hope it stays open as long as possible. But yeah, springs and wells are kind of what we rely on going through the winter. And Joe knows that we've got some bulls and some cows together just west of Clearwater. And I've been feeding them, but they have been relying on a spring or the creek staying open in certain spots, and I quite enjoy looking at them because I think they've done quite well this winter.
There's lots to learn from them, other than they're nuts clinically.
Yeah, I don't want to catch them, I don't think, but yeah, they've sure been easy keepers. So,
Aaron, what are you guys doing for water in fall?
Well, for winter, when we're bale grazing, we have a well. There's hydro there, so we use it's a 25-foot well. It's not very deep, and it's got high capacity. And we use an insulated trough with drink tubes on a demand overhead system, and it drains back down when it's not in use. It works quite well. So for shelter, we're lucky. We got lots of trees. We've got lots of natural water sources too. So we've got springs, creeks, dugouts, wetlands, sloughs, river. The Assiniboine River runs in the bottomland. It can be challenged in November before we get to the actual wintering site. Like I said, the river can cause us some problems with icing. But overall, we're pretty lucky to have a lot of natural water here. We did haul some water last summer. We bought a tanker just to give us some more flexibility. And so we were on one paddock that we wouldn't have been able to graze the way we wanted to if we wouldn't have bought the tanker. So we were hauling water every second day, filling it up. So I think it'll complement our system pretty good.
Nick?
Mostly on wells and stuff. We did put in some winter watering sites on the new land here. Haven't used them yet, but we will be. There'll be solar sites, so that might be a bit of a pain in the butt, but we'll work through it. And then I don't know, I try to set up some good windbreaks for shelter if there's a blizzard or something come in, just have some bail windbreak up out there just in case the worst happens. But yeah.
And I know it's like this year was horrendous with the dry summer. We hauled water for months, and it is a pain in the padded ass. You have to do it every single day or twice a day. But again, it comes back to dollars and cents. 250 cows, we got $2 a day cost savings. So I can justify my time or my dad's time or my brother's time hauling water at $500 a day. Never mind, the reason we have cows around isn't necessarily to get rich. It's to cycle nutrients and extend the amount of time that our plants are capturing photosynthetic energy. And I realized nobody answered this, and I know, Aaron, you posted this on Twitter a while back. I'll touch on it first. We bale graze. We absolutely do not bed other than the straw that they eat. And what we find is on the days without wind, they go lay in hay, they go lay in the straw. And when it's windy, we winter them on a half section of valley. They're paddocked off, but they always have shelter from the wind. And experiencing the calves that are sitting in a feedlot here, how horrible it is in the corrals here when it's windy. They're standing in the middle all balled up, and then going and checking them the cows' water, and they're just walking in the valley like it's a normal day. They don't realize there's any wind at all. So yes, they don't have straw on those really windy days, but at least they're sheltered and out of the wind is what we find. And those cows seem much more docile and better off than anything we have on the yard. So Stu, what are you using for straw?
For the cows?
Yeah.
We're feeding it. Yeah, no, they're getting no bedding. It's same thing. Like they've got a valley and trees where they can go hide and yeah, they're some of the worst blizzards of the year. I went down there and they were just, hanging out, and they still kind of bunch up in a bit of a ball to stay warm or whatever. But yeah, it's not like it is. They're pretty lucky to have the spots that they have to get out of the wind for sure.
Aaron, I forget, you put up a Twitter poll, didn't you? What did the Twitter world say here?
What was the poll? I can't remember.
Who uses straw in bale grazing? Or maybe that wasn't you.
That wasn't me.
No. Well, someone else. Tell us about do you use anything for straw or bedding? I mean,
No.
even on a year where they're not, the straw isn't for forage.
No, we never do. No, they just they lay in it, and yeah, it does get soiled a little bit, but the shit freezes almost immediately. So does the urine, and after they sift through it and get the crumbs out. It's obviously not detrimental to them from an intake or a health standpoint, because they're healthy, they're content up there. So no, we don't do any. And when the weather gets like really, really nasty, they'll just all head to the bush, kind of like elk, and they just huddle up. They wait it out, and then when it's over, they go back to the bales.
Nick?
This year with our move, we definitely corralled the cows more than I'd like to, and we did use straw. So, but yeah, we got work to do, but that's okay. We'll get there.
All right, guys, last question, and it's a pretty easy one. Final thoughts. That can be, how much better it's made your life, how much easier it is. Is it a pain in the ass? I guess mistakes you've made, or whatever you want as far as a final thought, as far as based on your system, what you learned from extending the grazing season. But yeah, we're kind of ending each webinar off with like a final thought. If I missed anything, or if there was something you didn't get to cover. Nick, we'll start with you, and then Aaron, and then Stu.
I think for me, kind of on your thought of things, Joe, is excited for the potential of the nutrient cycling, getting the system ramped up, what we can, how much we can achieve and what we can do. With us moving farms, I got to learn the lay of the land here a bit, and we got a lot of work ahead, but yeah, I'm excited to bale graze. And for next year, I'm excited for bale grazing some cover crops and keeping the cows out as much as possible. So should be a good one next year.
Stu or Aaron, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, no regrets on doing what we've done over the years and where we've got to. I think just the quality of life standpoint is really one of the biggest things, and not being a slave to the farm or feeling like you have to be the hardest working farmer out there. Your cows can do all the work for you if you let them, really. And another thing, like when we took the holistic management course, like we took it for I guess certain reasons. Financial was one of them, to try and get out of the, you know, the commodity broken system, more or less. And then the human side of it was another reason, just from a labor standpoint. And we noticed when we changed things to a more natural system, both of those things improved. But yet the biggest winner in the system was the environment of the land. And then like everything just sort of ties together nicely.
Stu?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, yeah. Talking about quality of life and stuff. I think it's been something that has been a pretty big focus the last couple of years. Is just, we got 4 kids now, and there's certain things that I'm not good at on the farm, and there's certain things that I don't enjoy, and knowing there's certain things I want to be doing, and I can do a really good job of that. And I think if we focus on that, what we're good at, and making sure that my kids enjoy helping me out, and not dreading, going to check cows or whatever it is. If I can focus on that and improve the soil at the same time, I think it's going to build a more resilient system, and not worry about the drought or the markets or things that are out of my control, and worry about things that I can control.
And I'm going to touch on a great point, Aaron. We should be talking more and more about the quality of life, because if we're not enjoying what we're doing here, what the hell are we doing it for? And it made me think of a story. One of the best parts about bale grazing for me, and I totally understand the system's not for everyone. For example, my old man, he would feed cows every day, every single day, 7 days a week. He loves it. He just, and if I wasn't here, that would be the system he would put in place, and that's okay. But I found when we started bale grazing, and even just grazing, like on our grain lands, it changed my relationship with our cow herd. Instead of cows being a bother of something I needed to do every day and blowing up flat tires or getting tractors to run at -40, I was going and seeing the cows because I wanted to go and see the cows. And I can walk through the cows and they weren't looking at me like, hey, I want something from you. It's just seeing them in their natural habitat. And like Aaron said, they will be given the food and they're going to be absolutely fine. They're going to regulate their body better than we can. And it just, from a mindset shift, it changed the way I look at our cow herd, which is I go to spend time with them because I enjoy them. And, once you get your mindset in a place like that, instead of, I fed cows for a lot of years, did my 3 hours, fed them, and couldn't told you if they're in good shape, bad shape, what their shit looked like. But when you shift your mindset to a cow's going to be a cow, here's her feed, and I'm going there to observe what she's doing, how she's doing it, it just gives you so much deeper appreciation for the animal itself, at least for me anyway. But guys, that was awesome. All of you did an excellent job. Thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully the viewers got something out of it. And anyway, we won't take up any more of your nights. Thank you very much. And cheers. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much, guys.